Awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Happy Friday. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying the conference so far. I know it's been so interesting and plenty of great information being shared. My name's Holly Hill. I sit at Southern California Edison, where I lead their sustainability efforts in our operational services. And I'm really, really pleased to bring this panel to you today about climate action in corporate America. Last year was really unprecedented in the amount of commitments people made towards net zero goals. There was over 1,500 in total companies now with net zero commitments as of last year. So everybody is sensing that the time is now and making bold commitments. So between businesses and municipalities, we're really seeing people take action, which is fantastic. So we're bringing together this panel today to share with you how it's being done and really share some of the details of what companies are doing to get there. We're going to start with Melissa from Cushman & Wakefield, who's going to share from her client's perspective and her company perspective about what they're seeing in the building space portfolio-wide. John will share from AEG, Entertainment and Companies, and what that looks like from that industry. And then Michelle and Dan will be sharing from the utility perspective and understanding how the infrastructure is actually getting us there as well. So very excited for everybody to be here. We will take questions at the end. And I do encourage everyone to please look at everybody's bios on the Wahoo-Va app, far more detail there. And we're gonna go ahead and get started. So let's see, am I not moving forward? That's a problem. There we go. Melissa's going to start us off, and she is currently the Vice President at Cushman & Wakefield of their Sustainability and Wellness Practice. Very cool terminology, very cool title, Melissa. Go ahead and share.
Thank you. I actually think that might be changing soon, but that's my title for now, so we'll see. But anyway, nice to see everybody today, or not see all of you, but thank you for joining us. I'm excited about this. I want to intro who Cushman & Wakefield is first and foremost, just to give you an idea of where I'm coming from on this perspective and topic. So Cushman & Wakefield is the third largest commercial real estate firm in the world. As you can see here, we have over 53,000 employees, over 400 offices, and we manage over 4.1 billion square feet globally. On the right side there, those are some graphics that I pulled from our 2019 CSR report. The highlight of those, can you go back? Holly, I just want to say something quickly on those. The highlight in those and what I want to focus on in terms of Cushman is that we are a very, very diverse organization. It's something I'm very proud of when we go to pitch to clients. Our C-suite and our managers for a commercial real estate industry that is typically white male, we are doing a very good job to be on the forefront of sustainability, DEI. We just hired a professional DEI, chief DEI officer to come in and spearhead this movement. It's something that we care strongly about. And I think that all of that is relevant when we're talking about climate action in corporate America and looking at the full big picture of people, sustainability of the people, as well as the planet. And you can also see we are part of Well program. We just joined Well Portfolio globally, and also are involved with LEED certifications and Well certifications, Fitwel, Energy Star, and are an Energy Star Partner of the Year. Okay, next slide. That's a little background on us. So we are in the process right now of setting very, very ambitious sustainability targets and goals that are aligned with climate science. And we will be announcing those publicly this year in the coming months. Our process started, our CSR program actually sits under our compliance group. So it doesn't sit under sustainability, which is something we're working on changing. But I am actively involved and help them, guide them through what we need to achieve in terms of sustainability. So there is a lot of collaboration. On the right here, so we started with the UN SDGs. On the right side, those are the 5 that we follow or abide by and are focused on. And I think that those may grow. You'll see in our upcoming 2020 report. This year, for the first time, we did a materiality assessment, which I'm sure the folks on this call will talk about or touch on maybe, and involved surveying our key stakeholders within the organization, as well as our major clients globally, to see what was on their minds, what was important to them, not just in terms of like the services we provide, but us as an organization, because our clients are looking to us as a provider, that we are also in alignment with their sustainability goals and initiatives. So anyway, so it started with UN SDGs. We are now doing materiality assessment, setting the goals. And we also, for the first time, are verifying our offsets. So we are in that process. And so that's definitely something exciting and something that our clients are talking about. We are focused on accuracy and transparency and increasing our data collection. It's hard when you manage, and I'm sure you guys can all attest to this, when you manage that many have that many office spaces. And we are also looking at the properties that we are property managers in. So Cushman and Wakefield, you think of us as like brokers. Yeah, we have brokers, but we also have property managers who are embedded at these buildings globally. We have C&W services. There's a wide breadth of services that we provide. So we have to look at all of that and collect all the needed data. Okay, can you go to the next slide, please? Here are just some of the reporting initiatives, engagements that we are involved with. So GRI, UN, Global Compact. We achieved a B rating on our last CDP report, but we have reduced over the past years our scopes 1, 2, and 3 by 10% across the board. So I do think that that score will be reflective of that in this next report that we have coming out soon. Also EcoVadis assessment and Human Rights Campaign for Equality. So all of those are the reporting that we're working on. Okay, so diving into the client side, and I know that this will help lead us into the next speaker, but these are just some of the clients that we are working with. We help our clients on their strategy around sustainability and wellness. And what we're seeing, and I'm teeing this up, how do we get to this climate action plan and why are we so busy right now in sustainability, which is amazing. And it goes back to the Larry Fink announcement back in January of 2020, when he said BlackRock, the #1 money management firm in the world, is now going to start taking a corporation's sustainability efforts into consideration when they're evaluating a company's overall value. When Larry Fink and BlackRock say that, the world listens. And I am not kidding you, from January of 2020, we saw an uptick in interest in climate action plans with our clients, mainly focused on waste at the time, but starting to talk about carbon. And then in July and August of last year, our clients are nonstop talking about this. And these are Fortune 500, Fortune 100 organizations. Some of them have already been on this path for a while, but usually mostly focused on scopes 1 and 2. And now we are diving into scope 3, and 2021 hit and it was all about scope 3 now. And since most organizations, about 80% plus of your GHG falls under scope 3, that's where you're going to see the biggest bang for your buck. So I'm so excited our clients are finally doing that. And that's the trend that we're seeing. And I don't see that stopping anytime soon. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give 2 examples. This is an occupier example. The next one will be an investor side example. I work with both types of clients, but mostly on the occupier side. So because I can't share names, I just pulled financial firm, that's what I refer to them as, and just talk a little bit about the process that we've seen on their side. So just starting out, level of commitment. All of our clients vary. If everyone jumped off a bridge, would you? Typically we say that if you don't want to jump off a bridge, in this case, people are jumping and they're just jumping and everybody is following them. Every client I have is asking, what are my competitors doing? Every client from every sector. That is what they want to know, and they want to be the leader in it. So I love it. Hey, if that's what you guys want to do and you want to follow the next person off the bridge, let's do it. It's exciting. This specific client that I'm referencing here is fairly advanced. So they are on the more progressive side. I do have clients like insurance companies, for example, that I can think of off the top of my head, who are just starting out their programs, thinking, let's just focus on scopes 1 and 2 right now. And we'll work on carbon neutrality and science-based targets later. In this case, what's driving this specific client, and I would say this applies to most of our clients, is we are seeing recruitment and retainment of employees. And that is mainly focused around the millennials and the Gen Z who are demanding this of their employers. And when you have a fight for top talent, especially in tech, finance, healthcare, bio, all of that, the top talent, they all need to compete. So that is a major driving factor, especially around the wellness side, but also in terms of climate action. And then investors like the BlackRocks, the folks who are actually putting the money, investing the money into these organizations, they are demanding it. And it's interesting, I think in the past, what we've seen as C-suite has not been as engaged in this process, but because our clients are demanding it. Our clients are going to our C-suite and our heads of, global occupiers and saying, you need to be in alignment with us, otherwise we're leaving. And we have in the UK, we did lose a major client in a pitch because of certain things not being aligned. So that is driving it. And then focusing on the data collection, we look at this as the ABCD process. So assessing, right? Every client is different. Their goals are different. Their budgets are very different. What can they afford? Offsets are very expensive. So if you're not there yet, you should not be calling out that you're going to be carbon neutral the next 5 years, because that's just not possible, especially depending on how big you are. So taking all of that, assessing what your core values are, your budget is, and then benchmarking it, determining what year you're going to benchmark. It's really interesting because every client wanted to know, how do I benchmark right now when COVID and none of our employees are in the office? Like, it's just so how we've done it is typically we were benchmarking like 2017, 2018, and then 2019 is just going to, 2020 is just, I just said that wrong. 2020 will just be an off year. And that's how most of our clients are doing it right now. And then C, creating up a plan, and then D, developing your solutions and moving forward on the right path. Most clients are pursuing, and this specific client is pursuing science-based targets initiative. That is the future of this movement. That is what we are seeing. Our most progressive clients are pursuing science-based targets. I mentioned materiality assessment. That's also important in your process. Evaluating your scopes 1, 2, and 3. I don't know how much the folks on the audience is aware of those. I didn't want to dive too much into them, but we are, as I mentioned, focused on scope 3, and then third-party verification for any offsets that the client has, just making sure that they are verified. And then to the next slide, Holly. And then a little bit different, it's been interesting to see from the investor perspective. We have a major global REIT that we work with, and it's been really interesting to see how their demands have affected how we manage properties. So having somebody, I think one of the lessons learned here was in terms of key stakeholders, having somebody senior at the investor side who is spearheading this initiative, and then therefore our property managers fall in line. When they hear that that person is on board with these initiatives, then everybody else falls in line. And educating our property managers, that has been something we've seen a lot of this year on our occupier side as well as the investor side. The demand from the client that our property managers, folks who are embedded at these sites, are on board with the initiatives, because oftentimes you're asking somebody, hey, can you collect this water data, or can you collect your energy data and provide it on an ongoing basis to me? If that person doesn't understand the why, they're not as likely to be on board, get it to you in a timely manner. So a lot of it has been focused on training our property managers, folks who are embedded on site, to make sure that they understand the needs and the why around why they're collecting data for this overall bigger program. And then technology, making sure that their technology is up to date. We're in the process right now. We have a platform that a lot of our clients use, but in actuality, it's not giving us everything we need for future demands of science-based targets, et cetera. So making sure that you're using the right technology. I still have clients who are using spreadsheets, which is fine. I have some clients who are very advanced and say, I don't want to use the system. I like my spreadsheet. And that's fine if that works for you. But most clients want it streamlined. They don't want to have to handle the bills. They want it all processed, like streamlined through. So looking at the right technology for the client, and then making sure that they're providing ample lead time for collecting of the data. We have a lot of property managers right now who are just struggling last minute trying to collect it, and they really should have been working on that for the past year. And then just collaborating and making sure that everybody is on board and on the same page. So that is
Awesome.
it.
Thank
And
you,
I look
Melissa.
forward to questions. Thank you.
Yeah, you hit on so much. We just completed our second materiality assessment, and it has shifted. So we'll have to talk offline, but the interest in topics have shifted. And then tools. I would love to do a whole session on tools and data collection, because I haven't found the silver bullet. I think we're kind of close and getting there, but there are so many different platforms, and not to mention not a single definition for all this amazing work we're doing. So with that, thank you, Melissa. Shifting now to John at AEG. He's the Vice President of Energy and Environment. And John, please share your journey at AEG.
All right. Thanks, Holly. Appreciate the intro. I work at AEG. For those of you who are maybe not familiar with AEG, we're headquartered in downtown Los Angeles at LA Live. We got our start in the late 90s with the acquisition of the LA Kings. And we are a leader in live sports and musical entertainment worldwide, running everything from sports franchises like the Kings and the Galaxy to music festivals like Coachella and British Summertime, to entertainment districts like LA Live, the O2 Complex in London, and Mercedes-Platz in Berlin. So kind of the theme of my points today is going to be that climate leadership is really about leading by example. And I'm going to come back to two words that have come up before. It's commitments and net zero. So, the point of my discussion today, I would say we're a little bit of a work in progress right now due to COVID. And I kind of wanted to, open the door a little bit to show our thinking and as we calibrate our strategy for the next decade. And try to accomplish some of these goals. So next slide. So what I'll be talking about are kind of what we now consider the old way of doing things. I'll move on to the challenge for us and others posed by COVID-19. I'll talk about our response and adaptations, and then also talk about some results that we've seen so far in our future plans. So starting with the old way. And one thing that I would point out as we have our 2019 sustainability report, of the four speakers, I'm the one that represents a company that's privately held. So there are some headaches in terms of reporting and things like that I don't have to deal with that the other panelists do. But getting back to that concept of leading by example, we started our sustainability program in 2007. We've collected, all of our material data going back to that date. Starting in 2014, we've issued an annual sustainability report showing how we're performing against our goals in greenhouse gas emissions, water, and waste. I highlighted this report partly because it's our last report. COVID kind of took us off of the reporting business because for the last 18 months, we've essentially been out of business and really have been more sustainable than we ever have, thanks to COVID. But this report was significant for us in that we adopted the 1.5 degree level of decarbonization. That came out in the IPCC report, which was issued in late 2018. I was happy to say that we were one of the first companies that adopted those goals publicly. And under that regime, basically, the drive is to reduce GHG emissions 45% from 2010 to 2030 and to achieve net zero by 2050. And there's that term net zero that I'll be coming back to. One thing that I would mention, and I appreciate Melissa for introducing the Science-Based Targets Initiative. I'm sure a lot of you in the meeting are aware of those. But we follow the Science-Based Targets Initiative. Being a private company, we haven't opted to, formally, go through the process of certifying our goals, but we do follow their guidance. And the important distinction there is that offsets don't count under science-based targets. So our efforts to decarbonize and to achieve net zero, if we get to that point, is that we're not going to be relying on carbon offsets to do that. But while I think we would all love it if all companies and organizations and even individuals adopted this, what I would say, moving on to the next slides, is that we kind of see this as the old way. We were approaching 2020. Our goals, as captured in that report, were all based on 2020. And then in March 2020, COVID hit, which basically took us offline. We essentially went from green light to red light. And that created a lot of challenges for us, both as a business and as a sustainability team that I lead, in terms of, well, what do we do now? We were all set to announce our 2020 progress, Earth Day of 2021, which was last month. And now, we kind of just have to recalibrate. So in sort of thinking about how we were going to address not only describing how we were going to achieve our goals, and, we don't have official numbers, but I can tell everyone that we actually did hit our 2020 goals, which was nice. But again, no real credit to us because it had more to do with not being in business. But moving ahead, we've got these challenges. The first challenge is, how do we account for our company's growth and expansion? So as we move to 2030 and 2050, we've always been a growing company, starting with the LA Kings and now this worldwide conglomerate of assets. And we're growing this year. We have new music venues that are coming online this calendar year, and we have several coming online between 2022 each year to 2025. And those are all brand new carbon emissions that we have to manage in our portfolio. That's going to be a challenge. The next step, and this will kind of get into that concept of net zero, is how do we go carbon negative? I think we are now of the opinion internally that net zero is a completely arbitrary target. And at the end of the day, it doesn't recognize that globally we're over 1 degree Celsius above historic carbon or temperature levels. So we are kind of looking more at companies like Microsoft that are saying, we want to not only offset and address the emissions that we're responsible for today, but Microsoft is now going after all of the emissions that they have ever emitted, going back to the start of their company. And we think that's a great way to look at it. But even still, there's, extra emissions. There's a lot of emitters out there, and some of them are not able to move as quickly. So we kind of like this idea of going past net zero straight to carbon negative. But that's obviously going to be a challenge. And then the third challenge, as Melissa referenced, is scope 3 emissions. How do we address that? We're just starting to calculate those. And I can tell you, and you're all probably familiar, it's hard enough to collect your own scope 1 and 2 emissions. It is virtually impossible to collect accurate scope 3 data. And that creates a lot of problems in terms of, well, if you don't have confidence in the numbers, do we want to set a goal around this? Do we want to pay for offsets for this? If they're indirect emissions and they're really the responsibility of another organization, shouldn't they deal with it? Those are all the questions that we're struggling with. So moving on to the next slide. Wanted to talk about our response and adaptation. So, we've had a lot of time on our hands since the start of COVID. And our internal dialogue has been to, let's learn from these current events, let's reassess, and let's reformulate our goals and strategies. And COVID-19 has caused a lot of new conversations to happen. I included this photo in the presentation because I love it. I think it came out probably the first couple of months in lockdown and here in LA. And that's what the freeways looked like when we were all at home for the first couple of months. And what I started talking with my colleagues about is people were like, wow, like the sky is blue. Like there's no dirty air alerts, people that live by, water bodies were like, the water's getting clear. Like there's dolphins in the bay when there weren't dolphins. And I think we all realized it was a great experiment to sort of show that like all of this is possible. Like, there are things that cause this. It's the burning of fossil fuels, to be totally honest. And we can address that. But the question is, how do we address it? The other thing that happened was that we got new stakeholders involved. So I'll be talking about our climate positive touring initiative that just got announced. But that was started by a couple of folks in our touring group. They're music industry professionals, not sustainability professionals, but they care very deeply about the climate change issue. And they came to me and they said, how can we change our side of the business to do better? And that's, led to that initiative being publicized. The other thing that's been great to see is the pace of progress, technologies, and innovations continually accelerating. Every year there's more and more renewables coming out on the grid, which is lowering Scope 2 emissions for companies like us. There's new powertrains, which allow us to, change transportation, fossil fuel emissions, battery technology. All those tools are going to help us get there. And then finally, it's leveraging external partnerships. Melissa was talking about her clients. Our business and our company and our industry is very reliant on external sponsorships. And we're hearing the same things from our sponsors, is they want to know, what are you doing around CSR, climate change, DE&I? And we fortunately have good answers for that. But we're also asking the same thing of our suppliers of, hey, this is where we want to go. How do we get there? So the results of that and future plans, and as I said in the beginning, it's a little bit of a work in progress. And I thought, maybe it wasn't a good idea, but I thought sort of seeing a work in progress might actually be kind of illuminative. So I can't really say what AEG is going to do. I mean, we have our 2020 environmental goals. We know that we achieve those, through dumb luck. And we really know that we need to publicize a strategy for the so-called, decade of climate action, 2021 to 2030. The question is, though, that we're debating internally is, well, what does that look like? As Melissa said, there's been a slew of companies come out with, commitments, right? Like, do I hear 2050, 2040? No, I'll do 2035, 2030. At the end of the day, like, if you ask Greta Thunberg, like, what she thinks of that, like, she'll tell you exactly what she thinks of that. And that's kind of where we're at right now. We're like, do people really want to hear what we plan to do in 10 to 15 to 20 years? Not really. They care about what we've done and what we're doing now and sort of where we're going. And so we're trying to sort of take that into account as we look at our goals. And obviously, you have to have some kind of goal. But the question is, how can we accelerate it past that decarbonization rate at the 1.5 degree level, to blow past this arbitrary net zero target, and then to go straight to carbon negative? And that's really the idea behind climate positive touring. Our touring group said, look, we've got a huge ecosystem within the musical industry in terms of these international tours. And it takes into account artists, it takes into account promoters, venues, and the fans. But to look at the whole carbon emissions from a tour, it's a massive undertaking. And we are not satisfied with trying to go for, well, we can do a little better this year, a little bit better the next year. Maybe we'll be net zero. The idea is that we want to go carbon negative to make our business restorative. Because as I mentioned, we're already over 1 degree Celsius. And yes, it will definitely help if we all hit net zero as quickly as possible. But we've got a lot of excess carbon that needs to be entrained. And stopping at net zero, especially for those of us that can possibly do it, it's probably not a good landmark. So we're looking at that for GHG emissions, and to kind of address the point of materiality, really also looking at our other areas of material impacts, water and waste. And I put waste in quotation marks because really kind of like, these words of commitments and net zero, waste is kind of an arbitrary thing. Like, it shouldn't be waste. Like, waste is an entirely artificial concept. Like, as a procurement entity, we want to say, where are these upstream goods coming and are they a part of the circular economy? And then for the materials that we have to disposition, we want to think, is this really waste, and what better use can be made of it than putting it in a landfill or burning it up or something of that nature? So, really trying to look at our industry and say, look, there's certainly we can do less bad, but let's try to make this a net positive, industry, such that, we can improve our communities and bring the planet back to health. So just got a closing slide here at the Staples Center. And when it comes up, would love to chat with anybody. We've got our AG One Earth email account up there. You can check out our webpage on our corporate website, and then you can check out our Twitter feed at AG One Earth. So appreciate it, and I'll hand it over to the next speaker.
So awesome, John. I appreciate the transparency And it's clear, I mean, you were ahead of the game, you know, a decade ago, and I appreciate the pause that the company is taking to reflect and reassess. It's awesome. And I think we all kind of picture the entertainment industry as, you know, as consumers and waste producers. And you clearly have shown that AEG is not. And so definitely I appreciate all your efforts there. Great work. Very cool. All right. Michelle. Michelle is the Director of Sustainability at SoCal Gas, and is going to share with her what they're doing here with their new announcement. Take it away,
Thanks,
Michelle.
Holly. Thanks, Holly. I really want to give a special thanks to the Municipal Green Building Conference and Expo for creating a collaborative and open space for such a healthy dialogue. What I love about this panel, and I'll reiterate, is that you get a glimpse of the activities related to net zero goals from varying perspectives and granularities. Melissa shared her trends with at the building level. John gave us a perspective on a broader portfolio strategy and approach and how to get to net positives by removing more carbon. Now I'd like to take us a little, like one level broader to how energy travels through our communities and why utilities and energy providers are examining net zero goals. Just a quick background on SoCal Gas before I go into this is SoCal Gas is a regulated gas utility regionally located and serving Southern California. Today, predominantly natural gas, but increasingly levels of renewable gas towards the future. We are the largest gas distribution utility in the nation with over 100,000 miles of pipeline infrastructure. We serve nearly 22 million consumers in more than 500 communities from Central California down to the Mexican border. It's a lot of space. Now, over the past 150-year history, we have been evolving, currently on the cutting edge of innovation with methane reduction, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. And much like Cushman Wakefield and AEG, our sustainability strategy is broad, and it speaks to environmental, social, and governance imperatives. Sustainability and how it lives in our organization is not new. And it's a craft that we have been shaping and evolving over the 150 years of our history. And as part of our sustainability strategy, our very first step was to address questions around climate change and decarbonization. So as Holly mentioned, earlier this year on March 23rd, SoCal Gas released what we call Aspire 2045, our sustainability strategy and commitment to strive towards a net zero goal in our operations and the energy that we deliver by 2045. Now, this is in support of our company's overall mission to build the cleanest, safest, most innovative energy company in America. And in doing so, SoCal Gas also becomes the largest gas distribution utility in the nation to include all 3 scopes of emissions in our target. Now, this aligns with Paris Climate Agreement's recommendations to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees by mid-century. And most importantly for us as a gas utility existing in the state of California, it supports California's 2045 carbon neutrality goals. Next slide. Now, Melissa mentioned scopes 1, 2, and 3, and I do want to take a few minutes to expand a little bit about why the inclusion of all 3 scopes is so important, especially to a gas utility like SoCal Gas. For some that may not be as familiar with the 3 scopes, scopes 1 and 2 emissions are what SoCal Gas produces, just with daily operations, with fleet, with the vehicles, with the energy use at our buildings in the vast area that we serve, and the fugitive emissions, what people commonly refer to as gas leaks. What people don't realize is that scopes 1 and 2 only make up 4% of our emissions, only 4. The bulk of our emissions, about 96%, is actually made up of what we call scope 3 emissions. And this is a good reminder that we are an infrastructure company, meaning that all of these emissions is a result of the fact that all the energy that passes through our pipelines to our customers have an associated carbon intensity. Said differently, these emissions result from our customers' consumption of energy. So today, scope 3 emissions are currently being largely addressed by our energy efficiency programs and our growing renewable natural gas in our system. But those 2 things alone cannot get us to our goals. which is why we are undertaking initiatives to support our customers to transition to lower and zero carbon fuels, so that as it passes through our pipelines, we are able to decrease the carbon intensity of the energy that we transport. Now, what we know is that we have a pretty good idea of how we can manage our scope 1 and 2 emissions. As John stated, John touched on energy efficiency, waste management, various procurement and material strategies, and supporting a circular economy. We can do that well. Well, we can do it better, actually. I shouldn't say we can do it well. We can do it better. What we also know is that scope 3 emissions, the emissions not produced or controlled by SoCalGas, will be a challenge. But there's so much opportunity here to educate and expand the knowledge that we all gain in forums like these that most of the general public do not have access to. And as we continue to operate safely, reliably, and more efficiently, our climate commitment is focused around what we call the 3 Ds: decarbonization of our business, diversification of energy, and the digitalization towards accelerated progress with science and data. Next slide. And as the largest gas distribution utility in the nation, SoCalGas has an opportunity to lead and shape the clean energy future with this scaled impact. Our net zero commitment goes beyond the walls of our company. It is about doing our part to have impact and influence in the communities locally, nationally, and globally. Next slide. And more than shape the future, we will be working hard to support the acceleration of progress. And John touched on this in terms of how we need to get to our goals sooner. We can't think about our mid-century goals. We need to think about interim goals and closer near-term targets, really to progress to our clean energy future in significant ways. And we're looking at that in 3 different manners. First, we're going to leverage the multi-billion-dollar gas infrastructure the generations of our families have paid to build over the past 150 years, including you and I. On top of our investment, gas infrastructure today is critical for flexibility, storage, reliability, and resiliency. The gas infrastructure will continue to be the resilient infrastructure required to reach the state's 100% renewable electricity portfolio and a fully decarbonized and diversified energy future. And I want to be very clear in saying that decarbonization does not mean the elimination of the gas system. The gas infrastructure will also be required to support large-scale adoptions of renewable gases that are so important towards a decarbonized future, such as renewable natural gas, or what people call RNG, hydrogen, as well as advancing distributed energy and carbon capture technologies. Next, the second thing we're doing is we are seizing opportunities to discover, demonstrate, and advance technological and clean fuels progress to promote a sustainable, clean energy future that is resilient and more affordable than not. We are supporting the advancement of low and zero carbon technologies that support cleaner fuels, such as hydrogen, fuel cell technology, and carbon capture technologies. Earlier today, Mayor Gallego from Phoenix spoke about waste diversion. John touched on waste diversion. We can do that with renewable natural gas, or RNG, today by using the waste to produce renewable fuels. You are taking emissions out of the atmosphere and you are producing usable energy. I also don't want us to lose sight of the fact that when we talk about innovation, it's not only at the heels of new technology. Innovation is about bringing solutions to the table. It's about continuous improvement. It's about building well on what we know how to do today. It's what Melissa and John spoke to in terms of like, this is what we did. Now we're growing and expanding our knowledge and doing more. And the third area that we will continue to spend a tremendous amount of effort on are partnerships. Much like we are all collectively sharing best practices, methodologies, challenges, and successes today, we firmly believe the goal to a net zero future to protect our planet can only happen as a collective effort. It's important to remind and ask ourselves, what problem are we trying to solve for? If the question at hand is about solving for climate change, a global issue, no single entity can solve the problem. No single solution can solve the problem, and no single energy source can do it alone effectively. It will take all of us, every single one of us. And all of the mayors that spoke earlier today also noted that partnerships is a very important criteria, where we need partnerships in academia, industry, trades, local businesses, community members, and policymakers, while being able to study the question at hand with data and science, with diverse thought around the table. And I applaud any organization, particularly Melissa and John, both of your organization, that raised your hand to take on the challenge of Scope 3 emissions, because the fact is, you don't have to. None of us have to. And what it really speaks to is the choice that each of us are making to take the opportunity to collaborate and truly solve for the bigger problem, which is climate change. Next slide. Now, over the next 30 years, the way in which energy is produced, delivered, metered, and consumed will look considerably different from what it is today. The challenge is that the changing climate will require an energy system that is resilient to wildfire, extreme weather, and drought. We're delivering reliable, affordable, and increasingly decarbonized energy to our customers in every building. The opportunity, again, is to reach carbon neutrality targets more effectively while preserving choice and energy resiliency. Looking at the energy ecosystem as a balance of clean electrons from the electric grid and clean molecules from the gas grid, and really looking at how leveraging both the electric and gas infrastructure will strengthen our ability to navigate our bold new world. Additionally, there's an opportunity to lead in a significant way through partnerships and collaboration. The MGBCE Forum today is a beautiful example of this, to not only reach our own climate goals, but to accelerate at the rate in which we can do that collectively together. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Holly.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Appreciate you elevating the conversation and recognizing that we're all in this together. So definitely, great presentation. Next, we'll be hearing from Dan Hopper, where he is the Director of Resource and Environmental Planning and Strategy for Southern California Edison, my colleague and expert in the field. Dan, will you please share our Pathway 2045 with us?
Okay, great. Thanks, Holly, and thanks to the USGBC. Appreciate the forum today and appreciate the invitation to talk about sort of all of these really just critical issues that we're dealing with. And I'm going to echo what Michelle said. I really appreciate the organization of the panel discussions today, starting with very specific sort of commitments that we're that folks are going through, and then kind of funneling out to just broader views on the kind of why this is important, and in my quick sort of discussion, it's a little bit about the how also. Commitments are great. We're hearing a lot of great commitments. We're really at a point now to really start mapping out how these things actually happen and seeing plans around how these things materialize. So a little bit about Southern California Edison, in case folks don't quite, aren't familiar with us. We're also an investor-owned utility. We're an all-electric utility and that serves 15 million customers in Southern California, essentially stretching from Central California to just the San Diego border, north of San Diego, about 50,000 square miles of service area. I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack on this, a little broader view on kind of how we think that California can best reach carbon neutrality and the net carbon negative, and then how SCE is organizing ourselves around how to facilitate that clean energy future. What do we need to be doing and to invest now in order to sort of actually operationalize and actualize sort of this carbon neutral future. This is really captured in our Pathway 2045 outlook that still today forms kind of our strategy and how we sort of organize our company around supporting a clean energy future in California and outside of California, because this is a dramatic reshaping of how we use and source energy in the state, a tremendous challenge, but it also is going to bring significant benefits and opportunities, into the future. So next slide, Holly, please. So way back in 2017, it seems like a lifetime away. We looked, internally, we looked externally, and it became clear to us that, if reaching California's even 2030 targets of 40% of greenhouse gas emissions levels by 2030 was going to be a challenge, and there was no great roadmap of how to get there. So we spent a lot of time kind of working with internal experts, academics, others, to really think through how best should California reach those 2030 goals on a broad basis that supports affordability and actual feasibility with known technologies, and including some emerging technology, but really known technologies. And at the time, it was this sort of, progressive sort of view that says, look, we need to get at least 80% clean energy. We need to sort of electrify 7.5 million vehicles, and 30% of buildings need to use electrify or transition to clean electrification using heat pumps, space and water heating, et cetera. Since then, numerous studies and organizations and state and federal targets have really aligned with this view, and we're actually seeing action through the federal government that's really starting to align with these goals as well. So that's the next slide, Holly. So soon, as we know, California set some pretty aggressive targets, transitioning to 100% clean retail sales by 2045, achieving carbon neutrality and net carbon negative after 2045. Absolutely appreciate John's view that this is an old view. However, this is a science-based target that we're not nearly on track to meet. So appreciate that. It's important to get more aggressive, but if you're not even on the track to meet the targets that are set to reach a degree and a half, then that should be a clarion call that something needs to change. More interventions need to happen. Great, again, more stringent targets are great, but if we're not seeing the action, then that should be a sign to all of us that more needs to be done in terms of policies, funding, and actual sort of plans that are being enacted. And that's what we are are going through at Southern California and Edison, and actually advocating for across the state today. So if we go to the next slide, Holly, we can take a look at sort of what that looks like. And so kind of this is sort of our view of how California sort of reaches that target. And now 2045 seems like a long ways away. But if you think about how long it takes to build transmission lines and distribution infrastructure and deploy 7.5 million vehicles, and by 2045, 26 million vehicles throughout the state, to electrify 70% of the buildings using efficient and cost-effective heat pump technology, and then to use low carbon fuels as well as Michelle mentioned, emerging technologies like hydrogen and renewable natural gas. And then all of that, figuring out ways to sequester and sink those remaining emissions, is a significant challenge that, again, is going to take a long time to develop, and we're going to need to start investing today in reaching those goals. So as you see at the bottom kind of slide, we're investing now, or trying to advocate for, again, putting in place sort of the procurement and sort of the infrastructure needed to reach 100% clean technologies, investing in electric vehicle infrastructures, pulling together programs and codes and standards to make big buildings more efficient than they are today, and to do the rest. And we'll get into the details in a minute. So if you go to the next slide, Holly, I like to talk about, we're going to nerd out a little bit, but I like to talk about this decarbonization story is really an energy efficiency story. So as we move, and this is a graph that sort of aligns with the previous one, that says, look, if we're going to meet these carbon neutral goals by 2045, then we're going to just have to use less energy. But the way that we do that is to stop combusting fossil fuels largely in the transportation sector. And so we transition a lot of those to electric vehicles or other zero emission fuels. As Michelle noted, we still need some natural gas and methane in the system, but in order to reach those two goals, we're going to probably need far less. And so we need to be upfront about sort of what sort of transitions we need to have to ensure that our energy system stays reliable and affordable, that we can, utilize hydrogen and other low carbon fuels like renewable natural gas, but be open-eyed about like how much potential is actually out there for those types of fuels. And so, this is the kind of, energy outlook that we would look far less, because when you transition to electric kind of end uses, you use less energy. An electric vehicle, for example, is 60% more efficient than a gas-powered vehicle. And so this is the kind of transition that we would need to see in order to have any hopes of reaching carbon neutrality. Next slide, please. So some of the actions that we're taking, like I said, we're really trying to put our money where our mouth is, organizing ourselves to sort of effectuate this sort of, carbon neutral future. And, we can start with sort of the three pillars of this transition. First, clean energy. Currently, Southern California Edison's about 50% clean, GHG free. Now we also have rates that, you could be 100% clean if you would like. But we're coming a long way and targeting to be 80% clean by 2030, and actually trying to bring the rest of the industry with us. Again, it's fine to have sort of the one-offs that are going 100% in the near term, but it makes little difference unless we make broad-based changes across California to reach these 100% goals by 2045. One example of how we're sort of supporting this clean energy economy today is the 1.3 gigawatts of energy storage that we procured in 2019 and 2020. I believe it's the largest energy storage procurement in the United States and potentially in the world, helping to support this clean energy transition. We're not going to get there without significant amounts of energy storage on the system. As far as transportation electrification, transportation is the largest emitting sector in California today. So again, really organizing ourselves around supporting a decarbonized transition sector through significant investments in light duty and heavy duty charging infrastructure. We currently have authorized and in the plans about $800 million in charging infrastructure investments to drive about 40,000 charging ports throughout Southern California territory, and really reshaping our transport and goods movement throughout Southern California, which should bring significant local air quality benefits through our kind of disadvantaged and marginalized communities through our Charge Ready Transport program that's looking at really close to 900 sites and really trying to shift about 8,500 vehicles or so by 2024 into electric vehicles. And then finally, building electrification. This is an area that, frankly, we think the whole state needs to focus more on. We have some support and programs in place for supporting, transitioning people to using more cost-effective heat pump technologies to reduce their on-site greenhouse gas emissions, the direct greenhouse gas emissions in buildings. Far more needs to be done in this area, though. There aren't great proceedings in the state for us to participate, for us to sort of incentivize more. But we do have plans in place to roll out sort of large-scale programs to help support building electrification as well. This is just a snapshot of the things that we're kind of doing to support this clean energy transition. It's something, again, that we're organizing our company around and really believe that that is critical, and that utilities, both electric utilities and gas utilities, have a significant role to play in these broad-based, in helping to companies effectuate these broad-based commitments that we're all making. But I think the theme of this whole conference is apt. The time is now. The time is now to move past the commitments and actually have the policies, funding, and actions in place to effectuate this carbon neutral or net carbon negative economy that we're all supporting. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk, and I think we're going to open it up for questions.
I hope so. I think we're actually 5 minutes over, so I'll have to ask Becky. Do we have any audience questions, Becky? And do we have time?
We can take a couple. If people want to jump into the chat with questions, please do. We don't have anything yet.
Okay, great. I do have a question. Thank you, everyone. Great information. I love the different perspectives, and I think the themes are resonating and very clear. I wanted, if you could each take a moment, just really quick, one challenge, like what has been the biggest hurdle in getting these initiatives or these actions or these commitments in place, and then not necessarily the resultant success, but a separate success. So, it could be bringing people together. It could be, the leadership commitment that you need to see in order to make these changes. But just a sentence or two each on those. So the biggest challenge and then the greatest success in this journey, I'd say. Who's willing to go first?
I can go first. Oh,
okay.
Go ahead, Dan. No, Dan, go.
Okay. At least so I'll start broad, right? The biggest I'll say the biggest successes are these commitments that people are signing up for. The policy support that we're seeing inside California and now in the federal government. I think there's a lot of momentum. And there is success that we're seeing. The electric sector is seeing a lot of greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and it's what's driving actually California to reach some of its targets. I think the biggest challenges that we're facing are going to be, I think the theme that I was trying to get through was let's put our money where our mouth is, in terms of actually kind of effectuating some of these changes, even in the state. There's high goals and high, stringent goals, but we're not seeing a lot of the support needed to get people into electric vehicles. And so I think more of that, is definitely needed if we're going to be successful.
Okay. And you can't use COVID as the softball challenge, everyone, just to clarify, just a caveat.
Or you're going to have a huge jump if you use that as your benchmark here. I would say from the Cushman side, our biggest challenge has been, well, actually, I'll say from the client side, our biggest challenge is really narrowing down the path forward, because there are so many routes you can go, and just too many options. So I'd say that was our biggest challenge, is narrowing down, focusing on one path, or however that looks. And then I would say the biggest success for me and from the Cushman side is actually just amping up our goals, because I think for so long we were just kind of like, sure, we have a CSR report and it's great, but now we're getting legit. And for me, I'm just like, so excited about that. So that's mine.
So I have kind of a twofold, because I think it depends on how you frame up the question. I think for SoCal Gas directly, I think our biggest challenge is our Scope 3 emissions. That's going to be our biggest challenge. It's 96%, and those are emissions that we cannot control. So that is going to be a huge challenge for us. But with that comes opportunity, right, to expand our sphere of influence and strive towards common goals and partnership. I think the fact is that we're solving for a larger problem, right? And with the larger problem, human influence on climate is really clear. And recent GHG emissions, as John noted, are highest in history. And if we don't start addressing the problem adequately sooner, faster, with great reductions, with major milestones in immediate transformation, it's going to be more and more challenging going into the future. And I think the greatest success, again, from SoCal Gas's perspective, is the positive reception that we've had with our climate commitment. The company that we are today, predominantly transporting natural gas, I expected an onslaught of negativity. Let's be honest here, but there was a healthy level of skepticism and openness that left room open for us to start having these conversations about our goals and to show how we're going to show progress. So I think that's been a really, for me, a great success. And I think broadly, again, the success is that there has been a call to action and a movement for streamlined methodologies. And this is going back to the science-based targets and what John and Melissa and Dan touched on in terms of really being able to be grounded in science and data to show our tangible and actual progress towards these goals.
Great. John, did you want to comment?
Yeah. I think for us, being a international company with, sites across the globe, that's been the biggest challenge, because I think Californians, especially folks who work in this sector in California, we take it for granted that, we have access to almost 50% renewable energy and, a lot of support from the policymakers and things like that. That's not really the case in other places on the planet. And so, we're working a lot more uphill in other places in California. So that's a challenge. I think some of the, helpers, the biggest, and I think one of the, driving factors for our touring group to, look to climate positive touring was, a couple of years ago, Coldplay announced that they were not going to tour to support their latest record, because they value, the planet's health. And they said, look, we just don't want to emit the carbon. And so that was like a real eye opener to the whole industry of well, if the artists aren't going to tour, no one's going to make a living. So, we got to figure out a way to do this better. And then on the sports side, Paris 2024 has announced that they want to be a carbon negative event. And that also has sent a really big message, across kind of the, global sports events like the Olympics and the World Cup, but also for, major league sports like, NHL and NBA and, the sports we enjoy here. So, I think people are getting it, and they're, demanding better.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you to our panelists. This was an excellent conversation. It could definitely be a longer one. I will say the USGBC-LA also has their Los Angeles Sustainability Executives Roundtable, where we talk about these issues. We talk about net zero. We talk about tools and platforms, and we really share best practices from among sustainability professionals. So if you're interested, please let Ben or I know. And thank you, everyone. We're beyond time, so I apologize that we'll need to end this session. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good weekend.